Mr. Weezer, myself, Bernard Parks, as chair, like to go through the agenda on the items that we're going to address. First of all, we have it should be 3 items will be continued. Item number 9 will be continued because it has not gone through the claims board, and so we'll hold that until the claims board has reviewed it. I'd like to continue number 5 because when this report was requested, one of the things that I believe in either budget and finance or in transportation, we asked them, LADOT, to also evaluate whether there were existing local transit mitigation funds available so that it could offset the use of Prop C or other city funds as it relates to the match or the advance on these projects. So we'd ask that we hold this report until they can respond to that question. And also, if we ask them when they come back, if they could take the time and put council districts next to the project so we'll know who they belong to. But that was the main question of trying to at least mitigate the impact on Prop C to see if some of the local transportation mitigation funds would be available to serve in that capacity. And then on item 10, continue that because this was a question we asked as a verbal amendment when this issue came before council, and they have not yet answered it as to whether the car wash issue is resolved as to people being paid living wage. And so until they answer that, we need to hold that in committee.
Ms. Parks, can I just ask why, what's the difficulty in getting the answer?
Maybe we have general services here because I was surprised we didn't have it after this length of time. Is somebody here from general services?
Maybe there's one. Because it seems like a fairly...
That's what I thought. That's why I was surprised. They wrote a letter telling us they hadn't had the answer, which seems...
Yeah. So you're going to continue to next week?
We'll continue to next week.
So if general services is listening, we'd like to know.
Yeah, we'd like to, because otherwise, like I said, it was, I forget when we asked this was...
July 30th.
July?
Yeah.
So that's been a little while.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll continue that for 1 week and ask for general services to come in. So on the agenda, if we can, with those 3 continuances of 5, 9, and 10, if we consent items on 3, 4, and 6. Okay. And the record reflect Mr. Smith is here, so we have a full committee. Any concerns on 3, 4, and 6 for consent?
Unless you do, Wendy.
I'm sorry?
You?
No.
No, you do.
Okay. Let me just ask on number 3, in the committee report, could we get with the city attorney and just give us an idea in the committee report whether reducing the amount of city funding, how that might impact the program as far as whether we have less services or less cases to be handled? On number 4, in the committee report, if we can, let me see what my note is. Could we just get with the Department of Transportation and just determine the actual amount of fees recovered for this fiscal year? I think they're projecting it, but until we know what date they impose it, we will not know the actual amount. And so if we can ask those 2 questions on the consent items, so we'd move items 3, 4, and 6 on consent, continue number 5, 9, and 10. Closed session items 1 and 2, that would leave the regular items 7, 8, and 11.
Isn't that something? It's cooking.
Get him to run more things.
Nard's on a roll.
You gotta make him run more offices.
I'm going to tell you.
And that was weird. He said, these are all the cases except the ones that may show up. Why would his case be on here if he came out? We're 6 months away from the end of the fiscal year.
And it goes sideways once in a while.
It wasn't a report that said those that we think we can win. I'm confused. It took us months to get the proprietary department all in one. Now we got the conflict between the conflict attorney and the city attorney. Now we got the city attorney saying, and there's some we don't even tell you about. We thought we were going to win.
I can't order people. No, you can order housing.
You have to really careful about some of this money, we found money that people want to money into this. We got to put all that stuff in
Pending all of this stuff.
status of this.
And some of the other stuff that we're going to be impacted by.
And I've changed the position.
Thank you. We're going to reconvene the regular meeting of Budget and Finance. Let me ask, do we have to make any public comment on holding number 2 or for the?
Just that it's being continued.
Okay, we're going to continue item 2 to next week. Okay, next item.
And item 1, did they say?
Next item is item number 7, which is the Department of Aging and CAO reports relative to a loan for the fiscal year 2008-09 Senior Community Service Employment Program.
Good afternoon, council members. The Department of Aging is requesting a reserve fund loan in the amount of $337,873.
Name, say your name?
Delilah Pucha from the CAO. Due to the current delay in the adoption of the state budget, this has impacted the department's receipt of grant funds. The reserve fund loan will provide funding through pay period ending on December 6, 2008, and this is for the Senior Community Service Employment Program. CAO recommends council to approve the reserve fund loan in the amount of $337,873. There is no additional impact on the general fund. Department staff is here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Let me just ask, is there some conflict as it relates to the trainees being paid living wage versus non-living wage?
I don't believe so. They're not actually.
Name for the record.
Oh, sorry, James Don, Department of Aging. I don't believe so because they're actually trainees. They're not employees of the city, so they're actually getting paid a stipend, not a wage.
Okay, is that what we call the community administrative support workers?
Yes, the
Okay,
cashiers.
so we view them as do we view them as part-time employees?
No, we view
or
them as
volun-
part-time trainees.
Wouldn't that be employee or would, because I thought the only time we classify them as non-employees is if they're volunteers. But if they're part-time employees, they're employees. I didn't understand that we created a differential between a trainee versus that we consider trainees as non-employees.
I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to answer that question. My understanding is that all the seniors in our program are trainees, and they're paid the state minimum wage as a stipend, not as wages.
So there's no withdrawals for pension, social security, anything?
If I may just ask the program manager to come up to answer the question about Social Security.
My name is Charles Babby. I'm the director of the Title V program for the Department of Aging. To answer the former question from Councilmember Parks, we utilize the city's payroll system purely as a cheaper way of paying them. We could use ADP, for example, or private payroll. And when they created just a classification to pay them, we had to use the term part-time as needed, I believe, as a classification, just to facilitate paying them. The Department of Labor and California Department of Aging considered them to be trainees. The only kind of employment law that might apply to them is workers' comp, which is in code with the Older Americans Act, and by law we have to provide that. No other benefits are provided to the seniors. They are trainees, and it is a temporary program.
So the thing is, and this is not saying be inappropriate, but you're just saying they're non-employees.
That's
They're
correct.
trainees, but they're not city employees.
That's correct. We only utilize the city's payroll just as a means to pay them and save our budget actually $25,000 to $50,000.
Okay. And then let me ask on the, as the state budget goes forward, do we expect to see any cuts in this program, or do we expect to get less funds into it, or do we have any idea?
That's a very good point. We had quite a bit of money as of last year. We did get a cut in the state's portion of their portion of the grant funds, which is used just for the participant wages, and that just merely covers the difference between the federal minimum wage and a California minimum wage, which by law we have to pay the higher of the two. So the state funds are just an addition that we use to cover that difference. And they did cut that back. And what it translates to us in the program is actually we do have to reduce the levels of participants because of that. We certainly wish we had more money because we could fill practically as many slots as we had funding for.
Let me ask the CAO, on the issue of, do we have any idea when these funds will be repaid back to the reserve fund?
It's my understanding that as the department receives the state funds, they bill on a monthly basis or in increments, and as they receive payment, the state funds will be repaid to the loan.
Okay, and those funds, that reimbursement comes back to the general fund or to the department?
The department would transfer it back to the reserve fund.
It goes back to the department and then they revert to the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have a curiosity question here. You know, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. These are part-time employees, and they are seniors, and they're below the poverty line. And it's obviously clear that getting a living wage and having health coverage would be an incredible plus for these people. Have we ever looked into that and what the costs would be, and any idea if we could look into where sources of revenue could come, or any of that kind of stuff? Have we?
That's a very good question. We formerly did have benefits, but at the direction of the Department of Labor and the California Department of Aging, we terminated those benefits.
When? How long ago?
2 years ago.
Pardon me?
2 years ago. The feeling with Labor and California Department of Aging, and it creates a dependence on the program. We do have our challenges in that respect, even without the benefits, and certainly there's an argument that can be made on both sides of that issue.
Well, I'd like you to come back with a report not tied to this particular moment, but to the issue I've just raised, and I'd like to see if we can think out of the box when we do that. I don't want to give people false hopes out there, but on the other hand, I'm ashamed and embarrassed that they're not getting the kind of what I consider living wage and health benefits, and especially 55 and over. Is a big deal. And I'd like to know more about it. I'd like to know what the state law was that was in conflict, and I'd like your department to come up with some ideas and options of possibly dealing with that issue. I don't want to give false hope, but I want that, and I'd like that report.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if it's possible, separate from the item, back to our committee in 30 days. Could we do that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And add to that what impact it may have on any of the participants as far as Social Security goes, because you can only earn so much,
Exactly.
and then
Right.
you start losing it. So
For income eligibility, we allow some Social Security to be received by the participants. Currently, for example, for a senior 55 and older in our program, for one senior living by themselves, they can't exceed $13,000 in income. We do have a number of items that are includable. Generally speaking, the excludable items would be the general relief, the programs that provide the benefits for the most in need seniors are not included in our income calculations. Social Security is deducted by mandate out of their checks. And as far as what they can make, we calculate 75% of their benefits are included, so 25% is excluded.
Put that in the report, too.
Sure.
Would we estimate that almost all of these people, this is their primary employment and plus Social Security, or is this a second job?
That's another great question. By the rules of the program, they can't be employed in a side job.
They can?
They cannot.
Cannot.
Yeah.
So this is the only source of income other than Social Security?
Well, they could, for example, they could be allowed a small private pension. Any dividends or interest are also allowed, as long as that side income does not put them over the poverty guideline level.
So they can have Social Security, a pension, things, but not another employment?
That's correct.
What Mr. Babby alluded to earlier is the fact that the intent of this program is not to be a source of income for seniors, but actually to give them the work training experience to re-enter the job market. A lot of the seniors, either their skills have not kept up with the changing marketplace or technology, and this is a way to provide that to them, as well as counseling and job seeking, so that they could re-enter the marketplace.
I understand that, but I just want to hear any more of that, okay? I'd like to see a report back on the options we have.
Okay. We'll move that item with those, and that a report back on the variety of verbal direction given during the discussion.
Could I just ask that when it goes before council for adoption, that it goes forthwith? We're about ready to run
Ask
out.
when it gets there.
Yeah, when it gets there,
Okay.
just remind us, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe it's been scheduled for tomorrow's council agenda?
Tomorrow?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay. Right. Next is item number 8, which is City Treasurer's Investment and Cash Management Reports for the month ending May 31st, 2008, and for the quarter and fiscal year ending June 30th, 2008.
Good afternoon, Joya DeForest, City Treasurer. We had an e-ticket ride last week, and I don't think we've seen the end of it.
Oh, boy.
As usual, we're happy to address any questions you may have about the specific reports, but like to bring you up to date. First on just a summary of what happened and how we're looking at it and how we're doing based on what's going on in the market.
Joy, I think these reports are a few months old, so we'd really like the updated version as to where we are today.
Yeah, like right this week.
Okay. Just to leave some of the anxiety, I'll ask Tom Morris to tell you where we are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the other stuff.
All right.
Good afternoon, council members. Tom Juarez, Senior Investment Officer. As the treasurer has pointed out, it's been a crazy week, to say the least. I would characterize this as an economy that last week was perhaps on life support and has now been upgraded to critical. In the 2+ decades that I've been involved in the capital markets, I've never seen anything like this. And
Where did it close at today?
down approximately 300 points, stock market.
So it'll be up 300 tomorrow?
Probably.
Well,
The way it's been.
not until actually Congress passes
Yeah.
the package. We could see this for a while.
In that
Yeah.
context, no offense, I don't know, I've seen more talking heads who know nothing, frankly, on the tube. They did a 3-page paper that the Congress is looking at right now.
Yes.
For the $700 billion. To see that headlines in the LA Times was pretty amazing. Do you have any comments on the record here about that?
About the $700 billion you're talking about?
About the 3 pages and what they're suggesting is the strategy.
I'd just like to know how much is 700 million? Billion.
Billion. Well, Councilman Rosenthal, answering your question, first of all, what they're looking at doing, Congress is looking at doing, or what's been adopted, or looking to be adopted by Secretary Paulson, is that basically the U.S. takes on all the bad debt of all these investment banks, all the horrible mortgages that currently are not tradable in the open marketplace. And in essence, giving them a clean slate. If that's going to fly, it has to fly really at this point. Last week what we did experience was basically a lockup, if you will, of banks lending to each other, which just basically can bring the economy to a screeching halt. So they have to rectify that. It's not a matter of when, or if rather, it's a matter of when they're going to do it, and hopefully the sooner the better.
And I guess I would say what is being talked about is they are going to get the non-performing debt, but they're talking at this point 10 to 20 cents on the dollar. So if they actually can get that and roll it into an agency, much like the RTC during the savings and loan, the taxpayers may come out good in 5 years.
Yeah.
Because their additional goal is to keep anyone who's paying their mortgage, and perhaps some of the ones who have stopped paying their mortgage through a restructuring pay something, just to unlock some credit.
On that note, can I ask you this? Because one of the people's comment has been, we're bailing out the banks, we're bailing out the lending institutions. What about those folks who are being thrown out of their house? Is there a way in which that can be protected? Because they have no place to go, and rather have them living there, even at a reduced situation, since it's the government taking it over rather than the private group. Is there a way in which that element can be somewhat incorporated?
Could be.
Well, I've heard that question as well, but I've also heard the other side of that. What about the people who continue to pay their mortgages? Is it really fair to ask them to bail out people that perhaps didn't use good judgment? It's a difficult situation.
There's a lot to talk about, but I know it's not.
Yeah,
I should do a television show.
Yeah, but I think, but I think the important thing to stress now is, in the investment area, we're very fortunate in the city. For a few years, I thought to have really smart people that had outside experience, private sector experience, and I think that's really become a great asset for the city in this environment. I'm really confident in their skills. I'm confident that we're putting together a strategy that can do the best we can. Not that it's going to be perfect, but I think if you look around at other jurisdictions, they have problems. We told you last month that we were going to be, might not meet our benchmark, track our benchmark, because we had decided, looking at all the models and looking at our common sense and education and experience, we weren't comfortable with the level of risk in the benchmark. And we made a good decision. It was the right call. The benchmark had a significant portion of financial institutions in that benchmark. So, Tom, how much are we ahead this month?
Well, up to date, our month to date, we're currently up about 46 basis points, which is
half of a percent.
Yeah,
roughly half a percent. We can't guarantee that for the rest of the year, but what we can guarantee that we're looking at this every single day, that we are being extremely conservative, and that as we report to you the good news, we'll report to you where we see some difficulties. We don't know either. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be on an island somewhere if we could really predict what was going to happen. But I guess my view is that fundamentals work when people follow fundamentals. And what we saw in leading up to last week, people did not follow fundamentals. I mean, you don't borrow more than something is worth. You don't leverage it more than it's worth. We look at our cash flows. We see what bills we have to pay. I guess that's about it.
And in terms of getting a response from Washington, I think just like we can't predict the market, we can't predict how quickly Washington's going to act. But, the Democrats have expressed real concern with Paulson's unfettered power to be able to make decisions and buy up some of these. I mean, it's like a $700 billion bank account that he may now have. That's how they're describing it. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. So just given that, it might seem like there's going to be a long discussion in Congress about whether, or can you enlighten us on that? That's pretty much all I know about that.
I think, I completely agree. I believe you will see a lot of this wrangling back and forth between both parties this week, but I think the end result will be the signing of this package. It's a necessity, as I stated before. If this doesn't get done within the next few days, it will continue to bring turmoil to the markets, And
nobody
it would be,
wants-
it would really dwarf what we saw last week.
Yeah, what I think came to fruition is that we actually saw a run on the mutual funds last week. And if this doesn't get done soon, first, we are so much a global economy, and I think we saw, whether we live this stuff every day or just watch it on the news, we saw how what happened here impacted the rest of the world. And I think there is a recognition, and I would agree absolutely that I think there needs to be some more oversight rather than one report every 6 months. But I think there need to be some reasonable regulations, and I think they need to move this along fast. I think one thing to mention, though, $700 billion is just a number. No one really knows what that number is. It's potentially a lot more.
Thanks.
Let me just ask, because this is so volatile, and we have a tendency to have you here when you complete a report, we'd like to have something to where we put it on the agenda. And if there's something that needs to be reported that week, we can have you come in, so we can just keep it as a rolling agenda item, so that we can ask what's going on, where are we today, because these reports, and we've tried to highlight them, they're 3 or 4 months old. And but again, we need that updated information, particularly if there's a negative going on in our situation. So we'll add that as a weekly. And if there's nothing to report, we'll say nothing to report. But we want to have that avenue available.
And absolutely be assured that if something had come up, we would have, even done a public speaking card.
Okay.
So we want to be as transparent as possible. We're talking to our outside experts. I'm talking to my colleagues across the country. Relatively, we're in pretty good shape investment-wise.
But, one of the things we used to tell Bill Fujioka is that when he used to say that, we said it means we'll go bankrupt at a longer period of time than the other people. And so we just don't want to get to that point. Natalie, let me ask you, do you have anything to add?
Basically, everything that Joya talked about definitely affected the municipal bond market. Last week, we were supposed to sell convention center bonds. We were going to take variable rate debt that was going to go into long-term debt to get rid of AMBAC insurance, which we all know is downgraded. Obviously, that week, that did not happen. There were no buyers, and the municipal market basically shut down almost the entire week. There was some activity that we saw. The state of Connecticut went out for $500 million, and they sold about $100 million, but retail, not institutional. We rescinded our notice to refund and reissued it today. We are thinking about just doing a retail period for about half the debt and at least getting half of it done so we can stop some of the bleeding on the other side, which is the AMBAC insurance. One of the problems that we are seeing is that variable rate debt has gone up. So wastewater, even though we refunded, we did everything right, we got upgraded, we saw a huge jump in our interest rates on that end. The one positive that has happened is that treasuries have stabilized just a little, which means that our swap payment or their payment to us that we're canceling as part of Convention Center has definitely also stabilized. We were seeing last week a payment of like $6 to $8 million, and that's why we kind of pulled the trigger and said, no, we can't go forward. It's back by about 700,000. So as you can see, in just a few days, the market is just everywhere. We have asked for comparables on our debt. There are no comparables. Everybody's just sitting on the sideline, especially the large issuers who don't really have to go in the next few days. So it's just really a wait-and-see game right now to see where the market ends up. One of the things that our underwriters and our financial advisors think, however, is that the first person out of the starting gate will probably do well because institutions will go to AA's. And so they think that we will get bought. But nobody knows. That's, again, the same thing. 25 years in the business, and the underwriters are telling us we don't know what to tell you. Go today, okay. Go tomorrow, make it better. We can't, there's nothing to compare you with right now. We have nothing to tell you where the scale is or where you should even start. So that's one of the issues that we're dealing with. We have two other bond issues that we wanted to do before the end of the calendar year, which was solid waste, which is the fee that pays for equipment and property for the solid waste division. We also do need to refund out wastewater because, as we told you a few months ago, we were unable to get letters of credit, so some of wastewater debt went into commercial paper. Well, now we've reached our maximum of commercial paper. They need to finish construction on their capital project. So we need to refund about $260 million, $300 million there. It's basically wait and see. If the market will take us, we'll go. If not, it's a waiting game. The third issue is the credit crunch itself, letters of credit. Several letters of credit come up before the end of the fiscal year in June of 2009 for renewal or extension. And the credit market is just really bad right now. One of the things I did when I was in San Francisco last week was I did talk to several European banks to see what they're doing in lines of credit, because they had kind of left the market. Now they see coming back in. The American banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, they're all, Wells Fargo, Wachovia, they all have extended themselves to get municipalities out of the auction rate market, and they're saturated. So we've already started to make contact with some of the European banks to see what they think. It's a tough ride. I mean, one of the reasons we went into commercial paper was to lower our cost of issuing. So the analysis that we will continue to do is, do we even need commercial paper anymore? Is it worthwhile, depending on how much we have to pay for it, or just go straight into fixed rate? And will the market even want to buy our bonds? So those are the real issues that we're grappling on, and nobody can say today is better than tomorrow or tomorrow is better than the next day. It's a very, very unique.
But are the European banks even interested? Because the European Union Central Bank has, to keep inflation in control, has kind of put a kibosh on their lending, haven't they?
Yes, they have. But on the commercial side, there still is some opportunities. Allied Irish, Deutsche Bank, Societe Generale, some of the French banks. The German banks are pretty much out of the picture, as we know.
How about the Royal Bank of Dubai? They got lots of cash.
Yeah, they went through this crisis 3 years ago. So it's just really looking at what our options are, which basically means that we'll have to be careful with how we issue debt. It's not basically, let's go. We're going to issue in October and that's it. We're not going to just issue in October. We'll have to wait when it's more opportune. Departments will have to wait for their cash. To give you an example, 4 weeks ago we sold Mikla, and it was $102 million, 4.2%, no insurance. We did really well. 3 weeks later, totally different market.
You didn't sell it to WAMU, did you? Okay.
No. Well, and then the banks the investment banks had disappeared. One of the things that they did was they moved Goldman and Morgan Stanley from being investment banks to commercial banks. Good or bad? Well, now they're heavily regulated.
And they have the access to the federal window.
But they have access to the loans. So it's a give and take there. Is it better or worse for us? Well, we'll have to wait and see what the impact on the city will be.
And just to be clear, there are other investment banks. They are not large investment banks anymore. And I don't think we know what the impact of that is on them. Some of the banks have done smaller investment banks have done business with the city. Where would they go from here? Don't know that either.
One thing that was interesting in reading the paper this weekend, is there any sense why some of the institutions were allowed to be purchased by Bank of America and others were lumped into another group? I mean, or why the insurance company gets $70 billion to stay in place? Any sense of why those were picked or chosen?
Yeah, well, Bank of America, the word was Bank of America had been trying to navigate a merger or acquisition of Merrill Lynch for some years. Couldn't figure out a way to do it that would get past the regulators. And so, yes, they looked at Lehman, but they have been dancing with Merrill Lynch for a couple of years. And I think you can find support in that on how quietly it was done. It was like, oh, by the way, Merrill Lynch has been acquired by Bank of America. Yeah, no histrionics. So that was sort of in the works. And as far as AIG and why say AIG and not a Lehman, well, if you look at AIG, you let that go down, everything goes down. You're talking about, car insurance. You're talking about, I think Ms. Brill will also let you know that they own some of our debt. Yeah. And it's an international problem. Lehman, I think it was bad timing on their part. And I think the Feds tried to do this piecemeal, as I indicated before, with Bear Stearns starting in January. But AIG, to let them collapse, everything would have collapsed.
Yeah.
AIG, not only do they own over $1 billion of our debt, they've been the largest purchaser of municipal debt in general, but they owe over $1 billion. So we've been watching that. They also carry the insurance for most of our MICLA buildings and our convention center. They are the insurer. And then, the issue of where do they hold any GICs for our municipal bonds? The trustees indicated they hold 2 for our MICLA program. So that gives you an example of how across the board, plus the mutual funds. They're in mutual funds, they're everywhere. Their little tentacles go all over the economy.
And I heard word, and maybe Tom can correct me, but I thought I saw in Bloomberg today AIG's already trying to figure out a way to pay back the $85 million. $85 million for 80-some billion, I'm sorry.
Million.
85 billion. Well, there's zeros,
I got the zeros, I don't have the other numbers.
Because the assets they actually have under their control and contracts under their control exceed trillions. And so I think another case where we had no choice but to help save AIG.
How is Wachovia? Have we done the changeover from Bank of America to Wachovia?
We're in the process. Wachovia, I can't tell you how pleasant the experience has been and how customers oriented it's been. The highest level of their bank have made themselves available to the city. They have about 50 people on the bank side for the conversion and implementation. We have we divided the city departments into 3 basic groups. And we did this because we just didn't want to flip banking services, go from one bank to another. We really want to examine the business processes and see did we really need the services that we were buying. So the first group of departments were those that really needed what we call a deep dive analysis. And we looked at that, met with the departments, actually flowcharted their business operations and their systems operations, went back and worked with them to make it more efficient, had them validate it, and then work with the bank to see what services they need. We're looking, the second group were departments that needed some work, but not like a police, a fire, a controllers, a treasurer, office of finance, a proprietary. The last group were those departments that don't have many banking services at all, but we did also do an analysis or in the process of analyzing those to see what they really need and if what they're doing can be done more efficiently by the bank. What we did find that a lot of services that have been typical for banks to do for the last 20 years, we found it being done manually in the city. And we found several areas where we can be efficient, and this is because of Wachovia coming in, and actually as part of their proposal, they hired a consultant that works for us. And so it helps us really go through and assess all the needs and making sure that the services are implemented on a consistent basis across the city and that we can make it more efficient and build on some of those efficiencies to reduce costs.
Any other question? Well, thank you very much. We're going to move these two reports, but we'll ask that we add this to the agenda on a rolling basis, and if the, we can get an idea of anything to report, we can have that item. If not, then we can just show no report. When is this scheduled to go to council? When is this scheduled to go to council?
This I wouldn't know at this time.
We don't have a... Just a report? Because one of the things I think, well, what do we have, just one day, council? Tomorrow. Okay.
Then it's a week
We should
Wednesday.
try to get it done as soon as they get back. We get back from the recess, so that we can have updated information before council about what's going on. And Natalie, we'd like to make sure you're there to talk about the issues. And the other thing I want to find out, where are we with the, Mr. Smith had a motion about having the pension funds come in and make a presentation. Are we,
I'll look into that.
if we can make sure we have that, if we can have that by next meeting?
Okay.
Okay.
We meet next week, don't we?
I think we're looking at that.
Okay.
Because I don't know if we got a forum and everything, so we'll look at that. Yeah, but the next meeting, we should have Mr. Smith's motion on the agenda to talk to the, what, 3 pension systems?
Okay.
Okay. So we'll move that item. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And keep up the good work. A half a percentage point, we'll take it.
Yeah, and this is,
Next item.
Last is item number 11, which is Mayor's Transmittal of Board of Public Works report relative to the status of the Public Works Trust Fund at June 30th, 2008.
I have not.
City staff are here to answer any questions you may have.
On this item.
Good afternoon.
Let me just save a little time. I think this is a report we asked for, and it pretty much covers the issues. I would just like, if we have somebody from this, ask Lynn to come up from the CLA's office. What I was wondering about, because on the, on page 2 of the report, it gives about 4 paragraphs about not being able to find what created this fund, not finding any documentation as it relates to the criteria and its usage. Now that we've done all this work, I'm wondering whether we should have, at least at this late date, to codify this fund and all of the procedures so that we won't have to go through this exhaustive study when Thomas is here in
Right.
council and asking the same question. So
Perhaps your committee could take an action in conjunction with this report and request the city attorney to return with an ordinance to do just that.
okay, so the city attorney, is it city attorney CLA or city attorney should be able to?
We can assist the city attorney, but we could send an ordinance back to council to do, or to codify the trust fund. And we'll, of course, work with Craig in his office.
I think that would be an excellent idea, because we have held meetings in the past with the city attorney's office, with the CAO and the CLAs to do this. There didn't seem to be any urgency to get that done at that time, but
It looks like
we would like to have that done.
It looks like you've done the work. It's a matter of just codifying the system.
And there's also a question that some of the deposits bear interest, very few of them do, and so there may be will have to be a provision in the ordinance, perhaps even separating the fund into 2 separate funds for those that bear interest and those that don't bear interest, just to work within the city's operations, particularly the treasurer's office, since they credit interest on an automated basis.
Okay. Let me just, anybody have any other questions? Okay. Let me just ask that we move this report and we ask direction of the city attorney, the CLA, the Board of Public Works, create an appropriate ordinance to codify this particular fund and system so that we'd have an appropriate reference in the appropriate code within the city of LA, and address the issue within that dealing with funds that are interest-bearing and those that are not, and whatever other issues that would create an appropriate documentation of this particular fund. So if we can ask that direction with those, we need any other departments? You said the controller, should they be a part of it?
They should certainly be involved, yes.
Okay, so we'd ask to add the controller along with the CLA.
Maybe, could we also just have the instruction being, and any other
In
department
any other department.
As
Okay,
needed.
fine.
that's necessary?
And could I ask that we include in that the task force and the city attorney work within, excuse me, the criteria that we've already established, the city policy, financial policy, so that we're not making loans for things that are not within our policy. I think that should be as a guiding light.
Very good.
Sure.
Very good. So with that direction, we'll move item 11. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so we have one public comment.
Let's see, who could that be? Nicole? No?
Thank you very much.
My fault for being here late. So I'm not going to talk about that. Public comment. Oh, a big 1 minute. Okay, well, first of all, you know who's going to... Give him 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes. Thank you. Just because all of those, when the government does its deal, you know who's going to then sell all of these assets that the government buys, the same Wall Street firms that screwed up the first time. So it's heads I win, tails I win. With Wall Street.
We gave him 2.
Now you got 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. Okay, now, first of all, I got 2 items. One, traffic mitigation funds, okay? There is a real issue here. We got a problem. Wendy was good enough to find $750,000 in traffic mitigation funds with Bill on the west side. We got issues in Valley Village with regard to cumulative development going on there. We got to get some traffic mitigation funds. I think the public needs to know where these dollars are buried, okay? And they're there. We need to find out. Last year at this time, give or take, there was Herb West was able to come up with $5 million when Wendy couldn't, the housing department couldn't. It was there. The monies are there. The community needs to find it.
Representation. It
Well-
wasn't that Herb could find it. It was, we all worked together. Herb chairs
Okay.
that committee.
Bottom line is, just like what we just did with the Public Works Report, trust funds, there are all these traffic mitigation funds. I would like this committee to, if it's the transportation department, if it's the controller, whoever it is, we need to find where those monies are because there's a severe need, not just in Miss Gruel's district, but all over the city. Secondly, since I got 50 seconds left, Janice Hahn's $36 anti-gang parcel tax. I would like those who support it on this committee to talk it up to the people. I don't think that it's being talked up enough. Bill's running for re-election, talking to a lot of people. You know what? You got.
Bring it up all the time. Just
Well, you know what? You know what? People say that, but so far I haven't read it, I haven't seen it, and I think it's important because it's.
Scurrilous press.
No, I'm not talking to the scrolls press. I'm talking to you guys, and I'm saying, okay. Now, bottom line is we've got Mothers Against, what is it? Mothers Against Gang Violence. That's the moniker. Okay, maybe. Out of your campaign funds, Wendy's raised some money. You know, maybe another 20,000, whatever. Anyway, I want to be able to just communicate the fact that that tax needs to be passed, and I would like those council members who are for it to start talking up so we can read in the paper. And one other final thing, Chief Bratton, okay, said they asked him just last week, if we had the $30 million and you had it right now for additional police, would you take it for the police? He said no, preemption, intervention, because that's a better place and use for the money. So going forward, that's my pitch. Thank you. I appreciate your consideration.
We have no other comment cards. Meeting's adjourned.
Councilman, number 10, did you want
I'm
DSP
sorry.
to come up?
Oh, we have somebody here? I'm sorry, you did tell me that. Let me ask, on number 10, we were asking the question dealing with the living wage, dealing with the car wash.
Ken Desowitz, General Services. I apologize for being late.
Could you explain, we were sent this motion, I believe, in July to ask the question about living wage as relates to contracts with, where we used car washes for our city vehicles.
We have one contract currently for car wash services, and the living wage applies to that contract. And we're working with contract administration and public works to investigate whether they are paying a living wage under that contract.
So it's in the contract, we just don't know if they're complying.
Correct.
Okay. How long will it take us to find out on the compliance?
Hopefully just a few more weeks. it involves getting data from the company that is on contract, wage data, payroll records.
Okay. Do you think it's 2 weeks?
I hope.
Okay. Let's just hold this for 2
As I
weeks.
said, I think there's a frustration by the committee that, we should know that. It shouldn't be something that takes a long period of time, so expeditious manner in which to do that. It's concern.
A written request has been provided to the company, and a follow-up request is being sent by Public Works ConAd.
Is this something that we can physically go out and audit?
You would have to-
one of our contracts.
You would have to ask Public Works Contract Administration how they do that. I'm not sure whether they do that or not.
You could transfer that to them as you speak to them, see if there's something they can go out and audit, because we'd like to have that information within a couple of weeks so we know if our city contracts are complying with living wage.
Just so I understand, so really I know we're giving you a hard time today, but it's really a Public Works contract ad that really does the administration of that contract.
That's correct.
And
With regard to living wage.
to live, okay.
And
So
do
we
us-
should make sure they should be here at the next meeting to do that, because it's not the first time we've heard that there are some that are not following that.
Yeah, and that great lady, that's the one in Public Works whose background is contract work, she's an attorney as well. Make sure they get the message that she should be here to give us an update.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. We'll hold that for 2 weeks.
Bye. Have a good one.